Professor Soumitra Dutta from the University of Oxford. Before I introduce him, let's quickly deep dive into what the agenda is looking at. So we have, of course, a quick introduction from the CSITM team from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and I invite Venkatesh to quickly give us an intro of CSITM and IIM Bangalore. Venkatesh.
Sure, Paravi. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Venkatesh Balakrishnan. I manage the Center for Software and IT Management of IIM Bangalore. On behalf of the Center and IIM Bangalore, it's my pleasure to welcome the speaker for today's event, Professor Soumitra Dutta, Prakash Ji, Purabi, and the entire of Wadhwani team, Rajneesh Ji, Puneet, and the entire of Digital India team, and all the participants for today's event. The center is a Center of Excellence on Digital Technology Management in IIM Bangalore, started way back in 1998. Professor Shankadeep Banerjee is the chairperson of the center for now. And over years of its existence, it has developed a huge global network of resources and has been serving as a hub for open exchange of information, cutting across academia, government, and industry. And the activities include activities to support research and training activities for students, researchers, and also the professionals. And the focus areas are on the contemporary topics, which in today's world, artificial intelligence, digital transformation, software product management, digital governance, and policy. And we have varied events, and events are held in physical mode, as well as webinars such as this. And one of the key upcoming events is the Software Product Management Summit, which is around the corner. And this is scheduled for 15th to 17th February. And we look forward to seeing many of you during the event. And with that, I hand it back to Puravi for taking today's event forward. I welcome you all once again.
Thank you, Venkatesh. We'd also like to invite Shri Rajneesh Kumarji to quickly introduce NEGD and, of course, this particular event that we are doing through Digital India, where we are live streaming this event as well. Rajneesh, sir.
Thank you, Purvi. And I would not like to waste Professor Soumitra's time, sir. The National E-Governance Division is an independent business division under the Digital India Corporation, which is a Section 8 company for the Ministry of Electronics. So we do project development, program management, capacity building, awareness and communication. And as part of awareness and communication, we've invited you to give this lecture, which seems to be a very interesting topic, how to use technology intelligently. So welcome on board, sir. And we are honored to have you here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh ji. Last but not the least, I'd like to invite Sri Prakash Kumar, who is the CEO of WGDT from the Wadhwani Foundation, to introduce who we are and what we do before we quickly begin the session. So over to you.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, Professor Datta, for accepting our request to spare your valuable time for this particular event. And this will be the 14th lecture, or rather masterclass, in our series, which we started last year in partnership with IIM Bangalore and National E-Governance Division. The center basically works in three areas, which is we run a skilling academy, fully focused on skilling of mid and senior level bureaucrats on new and emerging technologies. And we also have a small team which helps ideas generated by these officers in the classroom sessions, converting them into project. And we also have a small program and policy advocacy team, which works on tech policy area. In last 2 years of our existence, we have trained more than 5,000 officers in classroom style. And we have also started keeping our courses on the learning management system of the government called iGov. And one of our courses were completed by 200,000 government officers. So this particular event is basically a supporting thing which we do for our officers, where we invite eminent people from tech space, whether who are teaching or who are working in industry, and so that they can share their experience and enthuse our government officers. So once again, thank you very much for sparing your time. Over to you, Purvi.
Thank you, sir. So before much further ado, please allow me to introduce our speaker and our guest for today. We welcome Professor Soumitra Dutta, who is the Peter Moores Dean at Saïd Business School, and a quick introduction of what he has done. Professor Soumitra Dutta has been the Dean of the Saïd Business School, like I said, at the University of Oxford since June of 2022. Previously, he was the founding dean of the Cornell S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell University. He's the president of the Portulans Institute, chair of the board of the Global Business School Network, and member of the global board of the Dassault Systems. Professor Dutta is an authority on innovation in the global knowledge economy. He is the co-editor and the founder of the Network Readiness Index, published by the Portulans Institute, and the Global Innovation Index, published by WIPO. Professor Dutta has received a BTech in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from IIT Delhi, also an MS in both Business Administration and Computer Science, and a doctorate in Computer Science from the University of California at Berkeley. In 2017, he was awarded the Distinguished Alumnus from his alma mater at IIT Delhi. We welcome you, sir, for today's session. The topic itself is exciting, making intelligent use of intelligent technology. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm indeed honored to be invited to take part in this seminar series. Technology is something which has been part of my own professional research, professional practice for over 30 years. And I must say that I'm very, very impressed by what the government of India has done in the space of technology. I do think that the whole India stack, the other initiatives in Digital India, the ONDC, and other initiatives that are ongoing in India are really examples for the rest of the world. And I increasingly hear of people in other countries referring and making references to the success of the Aadhaar system, the UPI success, the India stack, and many countries looking at India as a role model out here, I would say, in e-governance. Recently, I did a project funded by the Gates Foundation, looking at the Pragati system. And, major projects are a big part of what India is trying to do, the Indian government is trying to do. And I was very impressed by the way technology is being used at different phases of this whole major project management in India today, with the Gati Shakti and other kind of systems that are in place. So at the very start, I just wanted to preface my comments by saying that India is doing very well, especially the Indian government is doing very well, I think, in the space of deploying technology, and I think that's a strength. But having said this, technology is moving very fast. And of course, there are large parts of India that are not necessarily using technology that intensively. In particular, I think, for example, Indian industry should be focusing on digitalization much more intensively. Indian industry should be focusing much more on R&D, because R&D is essential for taking advantage of all the power of digitalization. So keeping in mind the fact that Indian government is doing very well, I think there's a lot to be learned about how technology will impact our lives, given what is happening in AI. And I just wanted to make a brief presentation to you. I have some slides I'll go through them quickly and probably focus more on the Q&A with you about how companies in particular are leading with the use of technology in some cases. So let me just share my slides with you, and that will give us a basis for the discussion going forward. So I hope you can see my slides. And I just want to go through 4 points very quickly. The first point is a very simple question, which I think you can ask yourself is, why is a company like Tesla valued so highly? And it's not because Tesla has electric cars. Today, almost all the major car manufacturers produce electric cars. Of course, the personality of Elon Musk may be part of the story out there. But really, if you think about why is Tesla valued so highly, as compared to other tech companies, other automobile companies, you see Toyota is, the valuation is almost 1/4 of Tesla. Even though Toyota is a huge and very successful automobile company, the key difference out here really is that Tesla is not being valued by the market as an automobile company. A lot of the other companies are being valued as automobile companies, while Tesla is being valued as a tech company. So one of the first questions I often ask executives or people I interact with is, what does it actually mean to be a tech company today or a tech-based organization today? And at the heart of it really is the ability to harness data. The ability to collect data about your product, about how the customer is using your product. In the case of government, of course, the citizen is the customer. But essentially, by using data more intensively, more creatively, Tesla is able to offer a range of products. This is just one example of insurance, because Tesla is able to precisely monitor all the different ways in which you're driving your car, all the different locations you're driving your car, and is able to use much more information to give you a product which is customized for you. Of course, a better price.
Sorry to interrupt, but we can see your screen in the presentation setup mode. We are not able to see the exact slideshow.
I'll change the display to duplicate. Is that better?
No, sir. Yeah, now it's better. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Thank you for correcting that. So the whole idea really is that data forms the core of what today people think is a tech company. Now, if you look at a similar example in retail, and you say worldwide, which are the biggest retail companies, you see a big difference out here between Amazon and Walmart. Of course, Amazon does more than retail, but the interesting question is, why is Amazon so far ahead of Walmart once again? Now, part of the answer is because Amazon is a tech company. That's true. Amazon uses data, as I said, for Tesla very carefully and very intensively. But Amazon also has a fundamental different business model. And the way to think about this business model is by looking at its profit structure. These are numbers in 2020. The numbers haven't really changed in recent years. A lot of people think that AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the cash cow of Amazon. But really, if you break down the profit structure even more, you see the marketplace is the real cash cow. The marketplace where essentially Amazon opens its entire infrastructure in an open format and brings in other players to join the network. You see that the Amazon marketplace generates almost 2/3 of the sales on Amazon's platform. So essentially the idea out here, again, if you abstract backwards, what Amazon has done exploited the connectivity of this internet world that we have. Because traditional business models are on the left-hand side, you have the company and the customers, and the company deals with each customer individually. And what Amazon has done has leveraged the connectivity across all the different nodes in the network. And the nodes are basically different marketplace players, different customers. I can actually go and sell on Amazon Marketplace. I can also buy from Amazon and buy from each other, not only from Amazon. And the number of networks really is n squared. So you have an exponential basis of the model. Now, all of this also requires a very important notion of culture. And I must say that in my own interactions with government officials in India, I've been very impressed at how this culture change has now started to happen inside the government. If you look at, for example, in the case of a successful player like Amazon, you see that the leadership really is focused on a culture of building, of innovating. Also, what you see is that success is really built on listening and leading. So you have to listen to the customers at the same time lead. And especially the government, I think, in the case of India, has been doing that very well. So you have to come up with projects, come up with initiatives that are ahead of what customers might actually think they need or they want. And the same thing is based with actual practical examples inside Amazon. Also, what you see is that investing in R&D is very critical. So if you look at, in the case of Amazon, they built these fully automated stores some years ago called Amazon Go. And getting there was actually very hard. A lot of deep research was required for this. And that was only possible because actually Amazon spent so much more money on R&D. This is a weakness of Indian companies, and India in general does not spend enough in R&D. But you look at the amount of investment that the leaders make in the space, and that's where you see the leading edge technology actually coming in place. Amazon keeps on inventing and keeps on rejuvenating. Right now, for example, it is investing a lot in AR, VR technologies. It started a whole series of hair salons in London. Why? Because it wants experiment. Experimentation is very key. And also, as it wants to do, it wants to have a culture that accepts failures. So again, I'm giving you concepts that I think are elements of what actually makes a tech company. A focus on data, a focus on innovation, a focus on leading customers, a focus on investing in R&D, a focus on experimentation. So these are all the different elements that define what a tech company is. And I do think a government today also has to act and behave like a tech company. And part of that is the technology itself, but an important part of it is the culture and leadership. Because if you don't have the culture and leadership in the government or in any organization, you will not be able to behave like a tech company. So you can have the India Stack, you can have O&D, you can have the initiatives, but to actually benefit from it, you need to have the culture change also. Let me skip these two slides out here and let me move to the technology change that I think is important. Now, I'll show you a small simulation out here that shows how the water is being filled in a lake in the US called Lake Michigan. If the water is filled at the same rate as Moore's law. Moore's law basically says that computation doubles every 18 months. So here you see on the top right, you see a scale that actually goes from 1960 to 1940 to about 2025. And what you see between 1940 and 2010, there's no blue. And then the blue explodes because the exponential series essentially at some stage becomes vertical. Now, if you look at real-life Moore's law started around 1960. We are today 2024, about 65 years. And so by looking at the simulation out here, we are at a time when basically Moore's law is going to be picking up very dramatically. So we are looking at a future where the pace of technology revolution, the second wave of the digital revolution, is going to pick up very heavily. Also, you're looking at a very strong wave of deep science innovation. Every year, I edit what is known as the Global Innovation Index. This is part of my research published by WIPO. And last year, we basically said that this is the future we're looking at in any country. The next wave of digital revolution really powered by a vertical rise in computation capacity and a deep science which is driven by scientific breakthroughs in biotechnology, nanotechnology, new material science, and so on. And a lot of this basically will create a lot of pressures on organizations and on governments. So what you see out here is a simple representation of a linear versus exponential. And what you see for a long time, there is not much of a difference between linear and exponential. But there's a tipping point at some point at which the exponential curve kicks off in a very big way. And the key message out here really is that we are at that tipping point right now in digital. And we cannot afford to be content and be happy that we did Aadhaar, we did India Stack, and we are done. We are finished. Because digital is going to keep on improving at a faster and faster pace. And it's very difficult to actually keep in mind completely what people may want, because people often cannot imagine the future effectively. A very famous statement of Henry Ford is that people could not imagine what the world would look like with automobiles because they were used to a world of transportation by horses. So what is very important is you have to build in a certain philosophy of questioning. One approach out here is something called red teaming. And red teaming is something that comes from cybersecurity and US military, where really you take nothing for granted. You question the unquestionable, you think the unthinkable, you challenge everything. And of course, have no complacency. You know, in cybersecurity, they have two teams. One team actually built the cybersecurity defenses. Another team actively tries to break the defenses. Now, this kind of a culture of experimentation, of discovery is very important because if you look at digital transformation, it is a combination of two things. On one hand, you have to move forward from today, so build forward from what you have. Yet at the same time, you have to imagine what the future might look like and do experiments because you don't know exactly which experiment will succeed, which one will not succeed. And you have to actually marry the two. So really, in some sense, the challenge of digital transformation is this combination of a more incremental innovation and a more disruptive innovation that has to be brought in together in the organization. And that's very hard for governments because governments are not very good at disruptive innovation traditionally in most cases. So let me move to the third part, which is the promise of this more intelligent technology, which is typically today often put on the buzzword of generative AI. Let me begin with some hard metrics about how technology actually has improved in recent years. This is one benchmark, which is of recognition of patterns. And you see that since 2018, machines surpass human beings. This can refer to any kind of pattern, whether it's an image recognition of recognizing a face of a person, or whether it's recognizing complex patterns and complex multidimensional data from a factory or from a city. Any kind of pattern recognition, machines are better right now. If you look at the whole idea of using knowledge to do question answering, human beings are quite good at that. Machines were quite poor at that. But since 2021, machines actually now beat human beings. quite impressive actual results. Very interesting natural language results. I did my PhD work in artificial intelligence many years ago, and it was impossible and very difficult to do natural language properly. Natural language progress is very slow because there's so much of common sense world knowledge required for understanding natural language. And once again, with the rise of LLMs and other similar technologies since 2021, machines are better than human beings. Okay, so pattern recognition, question answering, natural language, machines have beaten human beings. You might say, well, human beings are more creative. Yes, some are, but today machines are increasingly becoming creative. Fashion design, machines actually monitoring trends and suggesting both designs and possible options to designers. Increasingly, the design of fashion and other industrial products is being done by database analysis enhanced by artificial intelligence. You might say that, well, machines are not good at forming relationships. Human beings have that empathy, person-to-person communication. This is a chat bot called Zhongse in China, initially started by Microsoft China, that is the girlfriend of more than 600 million Chinese males. If you have seen the movie Her, H-E-R, which is a very nice movie released in 2013 in Hollywood, this is a real-life example of implementation of Her successfully. What this shows you is that AI today can be used for pattern recognition, for question answering, knowledge interactions, for creativity, and also for empathy and relationship bonding. So if you look at the range of things that are possible with technology, it's actually very, very broad. And technology today is becoming increasingly very, very intelligent. The only reason why the big tech companies haven't actually rolled out this empathy and, the relationship-based virtual agents is because they all are trying to control the backlash that they today face from regulators about how technology might be used or misused in different contexts. Now, generative AI, of course, is the latest buzzword. And today, what you find is generative AI can be used for a number of different purposes. They're just examples from marketing and merchandising. But generative AI can be used in a variety of government applications, a variety of any knowledge-based applications that is able to condense knowledge and to be able to have an interesting Q&A with the person. Increasingly, actually, AI can be used for even creative tasks and for forming relationship-based tasks, which are very, very important. Now, I have one more only slide and then I'll finish, is people often ask me, fine, digital is everywhere, digital is important, but is there a simple representation of what a digital strategy model could look like? This is the one slide that I often use in my own work. And I say, well, there are 5 different components to a digital strategy model. At the heart of it, of course, is the digital culture and digital leadership. And the most important part of the leadership culture is that leadership that is open to experimentation and to culture transformation. Go back to the slide I showed you about Amazon at the start. The success of Amazon is because leadership is open to experimentation, open to a change of culture, open to trying out new things. And that kind of openness as cultural transformation is very important for a true successful digital experience or transformation in an organization. Starting from the top left, digital products and services. Today, you can digitize almost every product or service you provide to a customer or to a citizen. And often the key question becomes, how much are you able to mass customize your products and services? Sometimes people ask me, is there one simple test that I can use to understand whether or not a company, an organization is digital? It's very hard to answer the question. But if I had to give you one test, I would say, are you able to mass customize, personalize your product or experience for each and every single customer at each and every single interaction? That is a very high bar. Most companies, most governments, most organizations are unable to do that. But to do that, you need to have very good control on data. And it goes back to my discussion about Tesla and about Amazon. Forming and keeping data at the heart is very, very important. And that brings me to the next important part, is the intelligent platforms and making data the lifeblood of the organization. Today, despite the use of technology, handling data in most companies is still a challenge. I know this also in the government of India. Despite all the good things in India stack, the internal data integration is not good enough. When I was trying to collect data, for example, study the Pragati system, it was impossible or very, very difficult to actually collect all the data in the different platforms or different programs. And this is not a unique thing for India. It's a very common thing for other governments, other companies. But the ability of a company or an organization to have that intelligent data platform is very critical, because you don't have that, you cannot actually invest in any kind of intelligent AI system, any kind of intelligent digitalization, and essentially you will be always under-optimizing, under-leveraging the potential of technology. Moving to smart processes, I think what we see is there has been a big change in the way we look at process design. So in operations or in manufacturing or even white collar office processing, the primary driver historically has been efficiency. So you try to make processes more efficient and more customer focused. So you try to remove non-value-adding activities and increase efficiency in the process. But more and more what you're seeing is the focus is being on using technology to complement humans in an intelligent fashion. As I said earlier, technology is becoming more and more intelligent, more and more equal to human beings. And then the question becomes, how do you use the two of them in an intelligent fashion? Now, this is a very difficult problem, especially in countries like India, which have a large population and a large pool of unemployed young people or underemployed young people, because the technology is able to replace a lot of the tasks in which human beings are traditionally performing. What happens? What are the implications for employment? What are the implications for young people? It's a very interesting question. When I was in India some months ago, I was reading an article that talked about how some of the major technology companies, TCS and Wipro and Infosys and all, are slowing down their hiring of new recruits because they all are uncertain about how will generative AI and the auto programming capabilities affect the need for new bodies. Now, when you have a decreased demand for computer science young graduates, what does it mean for the young people coming out of universities in India? Very interesting question. The last point really is the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is very important because the connectivity, you remember the picture I showed you of the connectivity of Amazon? Amazon's success is because it connects all the different customers and other vendors and other suppliers together in the network. So the more you're actually able to build a connected network, the more powerful the digitalization impact can be. However, doing it is not easy, and many companies struggle to actually leverage the ecosystem effectively. It's like, for example, my organizational context is a university, and you can think of a university's job as to be creating and disseminating knowledge. our ecosystem includes so many companies and so many alumni working in companies. There's so much knowledge in the companies and in the alumni working in the companies. How good are we at leveraging those ecosystem partners for sharing and creating knowledge? The answer is very poor. Most universities don't do a good job at leveraging the knowledge of the ecosystem. So we are basically under leveraging the capacity of the network economy for our own business organizational goals. So that's really what I wanted to share with you in the half an hour that was allocated to me. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take some questions. And of course, my email is here. I'm happy to also get any correspondence from you in the future. So I hand back to the organizers and I'm willing to take any questions now.
Great. Thank you so much for that insightful talk, Professor Dutta. We do have some questions. I'll request Prakash to kindly moderate, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Dutta. It was very insightful, precise, but to the point. You started with Tesla, Amazon, and brought in what lessons we have for the government here. In that regard, there is one question from Puneet Kaur. She asked, in what ways can intelligent technology be designed to be inclusive and accessible to diverse population, especially in a country like ours?
It's a very good question, Puneet. And, the technology access is a multifaceted issue. So one is, of course, having the device and the connectivity. So you need a phone or some device, you need the data connection. So that is a very, very important first priority. In India, that was done through essentially the private telecom companies, largely Jio. And I must say the government did not really play a very important role in the access part out there. Then there's a very important notion of the skills and the knowledge education to access whatever is there online. If a farmer cannot even understand or analyze the data required to know what kind of prices or what kind of timing to sell, the online thing is not very useful. So the actual skills is a very important issue. So I know that we are making some progress on it, but we all know in India, skills is a major gap area. And the third thing is content. You need the content also, and content has to be in local language, has to be accessible. And we all know that having content in all the different Indian languages is still a challenge. Now, of course, generative AI is making it easier to translate content and do all these things that I said is necessary. But a combination of all these different elements is required for actually providing more inclusive access inside India. I was looking at statistics recently for India, and actually we are doing pretty well today on internet access or mobile access. The numbers are pretty high compared to the population. In terms of actual usage of some of the, UPI, for example, and so on, is not necessarily as high as it could be, but still increasing. So I think we have made very good progress, but there's much more work to be done on the area of inclusivity, but it's a complex issue, especially because the technology curve is going exponentially. So, you cannot say that, well, we've done it, we did what we had to do and we can stay happy and be content. Because in the next 5 years, technology will change even more than it changed in the last 10 years. And how do you actually keep on, riding the technology curve and being ahead on the frontier is a very important, interesting question that we have to make. And I think I completely agree with you that making it more inclusive is important, critical, at the same time, an ongoing challenge.
The next question is from BJ Subramania. He says, you are referring to Amazon, which is a company that is worth billions and hence the capability to lavishly spend on experimentation or R&D. However, when the same is applied to initial stage startups where revenue is paramount for its survival, how much founders plan for R&D where there is no revenue for, say, at least a few years, and a viable product from the same is created? What would be the approach here, sir? Is it to build a viable product and then dabble into R&D along with product as the main focus?
Well, it's a good question, and I think it depends on what you mean by a product. So I think most products would require some R&D to be done. That whether the R&D happens in a university context or whether it happens in a separate, organizational startup by itself, that's a different question. But let me separate out the issues as twofold. So one is there's a generic problem in India, which is the large companies don't do enough R&D. So India as a whole, as a nation, invests less than 1% of a GDP into R&D, okay, which is very, very small number as compared to the leading nations like Korea and Finland that have put 5%. And even China today puts more than 3%, 3.5% typical of GDP, which is a huge number into R&D. If you look at the global numbers for R&D, essentially it's two countries that do most of the global R&Ds, US and China. And India needs to do more as a country. The second question you raised is about startups. And I would say, the focus today, if I look at the global trends, is on startups that are combining deep science with the market application, market potential. So you have to be able to invest in the deep science and deep tech, for which you require research investments in the universities in India, in the research labs of India. And this is where another weakness of India is that I don't think the Indian universities are doing enough deep tech research. Yes, we have good examples of IISc and IITs doing some work, but we need much more. So we need to be able to be inventing and leading at the frontiers, and that requires a dedicated investment of research. So often we do research that is subsidized by some source, the government typically, or the industry, and then that research is commercialized by a startup. But that startup has to keep on taking the research and investing in it and balancing the customer proximity. So I don't think you can escape the research angle, but you can ask the question, how can we actually pay for the research more effectively given whatever the stage of the company is based in today?
No, thank you very much. Professor, another question is from Sudhir Agarwal. He says, you mentioned about both Amazon and ONDC. What can be the single most or two factors for ONDC to emerge even closer to Amazon?
Yeah, ONDC is not meant to be another Amazon. ONDC is a network, is a platform that is enabled to provide the bottom-up digitalization, because largely you have sort of two models of digitalization. So one model of digitalization is large company driven, which is the US model. You have large tech companies driving digitalization. You have then a Chinese model, which is a hybrid, which is large company driven but government control. Okay, so essentially the large tech companies today have been brought under the government control for all effective purposes. And the Indian model is different. Indian model is much more, I think, democratic, much more much more open. Like, for example, the India Stack and the whole JAM system and everything else. And ONDC is meant to do that. It's meant to bring in different players and allow them to do different things. The challenge really is that good commerce requires trust. And the question is, how do you build trust when you have multiple disparate parties collaborating on a platform?
Yeah.
Because in the case of Amazon, if I don't get the product, if I have a problem, I know whom to contact and who will solve my problem. So I know who to hold accountable for that trust element required for successful commerce. In an ONDC, that is not completely clear to the best of my knowledge right now. And if you do not actually able to bring in the trust element, I don't know who can best act as the trusted source to make sure the whole operation works effectively. Then the question is, there'll be problems in the implementation of ONDC. But if we can solve the trust issue in the ONDC implementation, then I think it's a really, really very powerful model. I think the ONDC as a concept is wonderful. It's really wonderful. And the challenge really is to now to get it to work successfully. And if India makes it work successfully, I think it really shows a different way to the rest of the world for how digital commerce can be structured.
Okay. The next question is from Shivangi. She says, I would like to ask your opinion whether India and its diverse population is actually ready for such advanced technology, which is growing exponentially, and how can government cater to bridge this divide?
So I think India is ready. So I got no doubts about it because the people are young, people have technology access today because mobile phones, data, connectivity is very widespread today in the country. And a lot of people have skills too. Not everyone, but a lot of people have skills. So I think India is ready for it. The challenge is that AI is the frontiers of technology require R&D. That's the problem. Okay. And as I told earlier, the problem in India is that the amount of R&D is not enough. So really, in some sense, we are not at the frontiers of even digital technology. We don't have the competence in chips. We don't have the competence in supercomputers. We don't have the competence in leading edge LLMs. So, yes, we have a lot of programmers doing, program development, but we don't have the frontiers knowledge of that. We have the capacity and the potential. So really, I think what is required out here is the ability to be able to be there at the frontiers, and the frontiers are changing very, very fast. And even the leaders have to struggle to keep up with the frontiers. Look at, for example, chips. US was leading in chips, and US no longer leads in chips. Taiwan is leading in chips right now. So there's a lot of complexity in the technology frontier, a lot of investment, and that there is no solution. If you look at, for example, it's not the digital. I told you earlier about the two waves. The second wave is the deep science wave of biology, of nanomaterials, of material science, all other kinds of areas, which is opening up a whole new range of possibilities. So the fact of the matter is that we need to be investing much more in research and R&D in so many different areas.
The next question is about priorities for the government. It says, please share your perspective on top 3 to 5 priorities for digital transformation of India to be future ready in context of ongoing AI revolution and beyond. Specifically, what could you suggest policymakers in India need to prioritize?
No, I think Indian policymakers are doing many of the right things. So I'm not just saying this to be nice to the government people who might be on the call or the government in general. I think I have been personally very impressed by what the government has done in the last 10 years. So, that's, I think, I have to admit. I think the government is doing a lot of the right things as far as the digitalization, basic infrastructure of the country is concerned. I think the government still has to keep pushing on the fundamentals of education. I think education is still a problem in India. The fundamentals of R&D. I don't think industry is doing R&D. I don't think universities are doing enough R&D. So I think that R&D drive has to be succeeded, has to be subsidized, has to be provided, pushed by government. Has to make it easier to attract talent back to the country. I think there's so many such bright Indians all over the world who come from India and were born in India and raised in India like me. And I think India has to more actively bring back talent or form bonds with them. This is what China has done very successfully, by the way. So one reason why Chinese universities have succeeded so well in the recent years is because they've brought back talent very successfully from the world back to China. Of course, there's a different issue happening right now with Chinese environment not being the most productive and most environmentally friendly. But I think there's a whole thing of bringing back talent to the country. So when you talk about priorities for the government on digitalization, I would say keep digitizing the government even more. So keep on the path that you're doing right now. Keep on doing more of it. Focus a lot more on education of the population. Focus a lot more on basic infrastructure for helping small businesses, large businesses digitize their operations is very important. Keep investing in leading edge technologies, which is very important. And the leading edge technology investments can only happen with some support from the government. It is very difficult for private corporations alone to do it. Private companies have to do it also, but you need some government support out here. Even look at, for example, all the frontier technologies in the US. They were done initially with government support, whether it's genomic technologies, or whether it's AI, or whether it's internet. And later, of course, private sector picked it up, because if it's very frontier technologies, the private sector is often not willing to be able to invest money for return that is uncertain, very long time. So those would be some of my priorities about what the government is doing or should do.
This question is to you as a teacher. It says, please tell us something about how AI tools are affecting education, like education finding it increasingly difficult to evaluate students' work done using ChatGPT and so.
It's an excellent question. I think about it every day. I talk to many of my colleagues about it, and I can tell you there's no clear answer. If you look at the range of things I said about what AI is capable of doing, the reality is that AI can take over a lot of the functions of a professor. A lot, okay? Even the relationship side, even the course advising side, a lot of the functions can be taken over by machines. Will not happen tomorrow, but in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it is quite likely that there will be intelligent, AI-based tutors that look like human beings, that interact with you like human beings, can have a conversation with you like a human being, that actually are not actual human beings, and that actually form relationships with you like that Chinese bot that I showed you, the Chinese bot that makes you fall in love with the bot. So this is, I think, a big question mark. On one hand, on the positive side, it is very good because you need more teachers, you need more professors. There's so many students who don't have education, who don't have schools. So it's very good for helping push the UN SDG goals education. On the other hand, it's a big, threat to some of the existing universities, which are often run by existing professors like me. And like all professors are human beings at the end of the day. So they are worried about their jobs, just like a factory worker might be worried about his job. And anything that threatens your job, obviously, there is a pushback against it. So in universities right now, you do find some pushback against AI or AI-based approaches like ChatGPT and so on. And people will have good reasons for justifying it, It's not good enough, students like me more than the GPT and so on. But these things change very fast. Again, keep in mind that the simulation I showed you about the blue water, we are at that phase at which the water is now filling the lake. So it's going to actually change so fast that we will not be able to even imagine it today how fast change will be. So I think most universities need to do what I described in the talk, need to experiment. We don't know what the future is. It's like the time when you couldn't imagine the world with cars when you're living in a world with horses. So we don't know the world of education when AI is widespread and intelligent, when you're today living in a world of human beings and human tutors and human professors. So to imagine that future, you have to do experiments. And that's what we are doing, at least I'm trying to do at Oxford, is do experiments and try to see which experiment works, what can we learn, and try to see how we can combine the building forwards and creating backwards kind of story. And that's an ongoing challenge for us right now. I can tell you that, many professors, some are very eager to adopt technology, some of them are against it. And that's a natural human reaction, that you find any organization. So how do you actually, cultivate that process and curate the process is a very interesting challenge. But that's what, makes the leadership issue very interesting now in educational context.
So the related question here is, sir, to meet and handle future technology requirements and challenges, can you share your opinion about kinds of changes required in our educational setup in India?
I think, many are required. So I think in Indian education, there are two sides to the education debate. So one is just providing good, high quality education to everyone in the country. That's the first sort of basic requirement. And there we already have gaps. We know that we have problems with the schooling system, the school access, the quality of schools, the availability of professors. So I think there's a lot of investment required in the schools itself. I think the country is not investing enough in schools, education. That's a huge problem in the country's development path in the last 30, 40 years. The second is doing research at the frontiers. Not everyone needs to do research. Not every university needs to do research. Not every professor needs to do research. But you do need to have a certain select group of universities, a select group of professors becoming good at the research frontier. That requires dedicated talent and dedicated resources. So you have to do both of these things at the same time. And, it's a challenge for countries like India, which have multiple, demands on your time about what do you invest in. Do you invest in basic education or do you invest in subsidies for a chip plant? It's a very difficult question. And at the same time, if you want to be a leading economy in the world, you have to keep on doing multiple things. You cannot do only one thing. So it's a challenge, I think, that the government is trying to do some good work in, but there's a lot more room for improvement on that.
In fact, the related question is, unless there is an incentive, why would they invest into research if the funding is not from the government? That's
very simple. If you look at worldwide, what has happened is, the government funding worldwide has gone down in the last 15 years, hasn't gone up. But what has happened is private business has covered the gap even more. So the amount of money being spent by private business on R&D has gone up much more than the fall in the government funding. Why does private business invest in R&D? Simply because it leads to more profits, let's put it bluntly. So you have to actually compete in this market. You have to look at investing in the R&D to be able to get more profits. And, even, for example, in the digital space, you just compare the revenues or profitability per employee for any one of the Indian tech firms with Microsoft or any of the other big US tech firms. You'll see a huge gap. And the gap is because of R&D, fundamentally. Okay, if you have more good investment R&D, you should be able to create better products that get better revenue and better profitability for the company. And that's the reason why companies invest in R&D.
We are coming to the end of the session, Professor. This is the last question. Although a lot of work is being done towards regulating AI and defining the ethical use of AI, there seems to be quite a gray area. So there's always a debate on whether there should be regulation or not, since AI is still in a very nascent stage. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so I think we cannot avoid the question of regulation because regulation is important for any technology that can have a negative impact on society. And today, in a situation where already, for example, we start seeing some negative impacts of AI on society, regulation is important because that's the purpose of regulation, is to protect, and do the overall good of society as a whole. The challenge in AI regulation is that the technology is getting so complex and it is so new that regulators themselves are struggling with understanding what they're regulating and what the actual impacts are. It's like, think about social media. Go back to social media 20 years ago. We just celebrated 20 years of Facebook. Okay, social media is 25 years old. Right. Go back 25 years and Facebook 20 years old, and you ask the question, could you have predicted all the different impacts that social media are showing right now? Okay. All the good and the bad. Similarly, looking at AI today, it is very, very difficult to, in fact, predict what will the good and bad of AI in 10 years, 15 years from now. And how do you regulate that is a very important question. You don't know what the full impact will be. So that's one important challenge. A second important challenge is the technology of AI itself is getting so complicated. These large LLMs, they're horrendously complex already, and they're getting more complex every year. And when the complexity increases at such a fast pace, from an engineering point of view, it's becoming harder and harder to actually understand what is happening inside these machines. I've spoken to some of the people who are actually designing these LLMs, and privately they admit that they cannot fully themselves explain why the LLMs are doing some things. Okay, the people designing it are unable to actually understand the complexity and how it's leaving the results that it's creating right now. So that's a big challenge of regulation I see. We don't fully understand the impacts, and the same technology is so horrendously complex. But the answer is, like anything else, you've got to try. You've got to begin with some regulations, adapt it, be flexible, learn from it, and move forward. I don't think no regulation is a possible solution. So I think regulation is important because AI is becoming too prevalent and too risky for society as a whole.
Thank you very much, Professor. Purvi, over to you.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, on behalf of the Vardhani Government Digital Transformation Team, IIM Bangalore and NEGD Professor Dutta, we want to sincerely thank you and extend our vote of thanks to you to make time for us, share your insights and experiences. And it's evident in the exodus of questions that we've received. We've not been able to ask all questions, but like you mentioned in your presentation, we'll urge everyone to reach out to you. We will also send these questions to you. Should you have the time, perhaps you can, answer them and send your responses to us. So thank you so much for this informative, insightful session. It sparked a lot of interest in our audiences. We'd also like to thank our partners at IIM Bangalore, NEGD, and of course our WGDG team. Thank you, Prakash ji, Rajneesh ji, Venkatesh, Puneet, and team. And lastly, again, thank you, Professor Dutta, sincerely for your time. And most importantly, we also thank our ever so loyal audience. This has been an exciting episode 2 for season 2, and we look forward for the 3rd episode in the coming month. Thank you again for tuning in, everybody. And we also see Professor Shankadeep has also joined. So would you like to say something before we close the episode? Professor Shankadeep.
Excited to hear, what Professor Dutta has to share, right? So we are glad to invite him to CSITM and, WITP's event. So we're really, really glad that you could give us time for this. So thank you so much. And, just looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks for joining. We will see you next month with another guest speaker.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.